Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Abeer's Book Reviews, and today I'll be reviewing this book, The User Illusion, Cutting Consciousness Down to Size by Tor Norretranders. Or at least that's how I think you pronounce his name. Tor Norretranders is a Danish writer, and this book pulls together ideas about, what are you, pretty much. If you've ever wondered what I means or what the self means or what me, as a pronoun we use to refer to the person speaking those words, so to say. If you've ever wondered what any of it actually means, who's in control, who does what, this is a great book. It's one of my first of this kind. I don't think I've ever read a book particularly about this niche of philosophy, which is, dealing with the self. But yeah, this book pulls together, it amalgamates things from information theory to psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, even thermodynamics in the beginning, to argue that our conscious mind, which is the I that we identify with, is in some sense a user interface. It's not the person behind everything. It's not the person in control. It's more so an interaction layer on top of the person who's in control. So, just like you're on your phone and the buttons on your phone, the text on your phone, the images on your phone, they're all the user interface so that you don't have to directly deal with the individual LED signs or, small micro LEDs or the individual zeros and ones encompassing, what state those LEDs should be on. That's the user interface. And the book argues that ourself, the I that we perceive as being ourself, is more so a user interface than anything else. It's very highly edited. It quite literally transforms what the physical reality is underlying that illusion or underlying that interface. It does a very almost magical job of making that physical transformation happen and simplifies it down while also complicating certain aspects of it. So to go back to the analogy of the phone, there's transistors which are 0 or 1. Now, in theory, that is a really simple state to understand. But when there's trillions of these transistors, all the different possible, permutations and combinations of the zeros and ones starts to become increasingly complex, and you're not going to be able to remember or understand what every single one of them means. So, in a sense, the user interface simplifies all of that down into a visual representation that we're able to grasp and understand much more easily. But it also complicates things because now instead of just a binary 0 or a 1, there's this color, there's the saturation, there's the hue, there's the brightness, there's all these other things that go along with it. There's sound to accompany the zeros and ones. Sometimes the pictures start moving. That's a whole other dimension. So there's simplification and there's complication in the user interface. And Tor Norretranders makes some of the same arguments about ourselves, and he talks about very computer related things like bits, bandwidth, how much data can you process. And one interesting thing, I think, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was our senses take about 11 million bits per second, and our conscious awareness, or sort of the reality that we can act upon, handles maximum of 50 bits per second. So there's a very big, multiple orders of magnitude disparity between how much we take in and how much we can actually process and act upon. So what that means is a vast majority of what's happening in the brain and the body, right? Because your body is what perceives everything, all the sensory organs, eyes, nose, tongue, skin, ears. They're the body, and they're directly feeding into the mind at 11 million bits per second. But there's a great filtering mechanism before all of those 11 million can reach the you, or the part of you which acts on that information and that actually processes it. That's only at about 50 bits per second. So that's like a really interesting concept, which at least I got to learn about in this book, and I hadn't heard this anywhere else. It might have been some other people's work. It's that, and so in a sense, what you call thinking and decision making and free will, most of it is unconscious, not even subconscious. It's unconscious, and the consciousness that you and I have is more like a, I don't know, in a sense, it's more like, I don't exactly know what the right word for it would be, but it's more so the person giving the explanations after the fact. So like a PR person almost. Your unconscious is the active decision maker for a majority of things, and then you or I yourself is more so the public relations aficionado who goes out and explains what happens in a sense. Another amazing idea introduced really early on in the book is this thing about exformation. So we know information. It's, what are the contents of something, or what are the implicit and explicit meanings encompassed in something. That's the information that you get. But exformation is introduced and referred to this idea of all the information that is left out or is sort of thrown away, but you still have a meaningful, coherent message. And the idea behind exformation is that you don't actually explicitly say everything about everything when you're having a conversation, when you're describing something. So if I say I'm wearing a t-shirt, it implies, the implied meaning in this is that I am a human because humans wear t-shirt. The t-shirt is made of some material. It's not imaginary because most t-shirts are made of a physical, tangible material. And so those two pieces of information, and it also implies in some sense that I have a torso because t-shirts are worn on torso. So it's not just I'm a head with limbs attached to it. I actually have a chest and a stomach, which make up my torso, which is where the t-shirt sits. So these three pieces of information, to give you an example, would be considered exformation. That this information is implicitly encoded in me saying I'm wearing a t-shirt, but we never say it out loud. And that's the idea of exformation, that this makes up a meaningful, coherent, useful message without ever being explicitly said, and we just throw these out. Now he gives a lot more examples of how context, body language, and a lot of unconscious processing goes into having a very elementary conversation. Even if I say I read a book, what does that mean? I know how to read, I know how to talk because I'm communicating that I read a book. It means that I have the resources to access something of the printed form. And one thing would be that it's either in the printed form, which means I have access to a library or Amazon or whatever. The other information which could be encoded is I read it digitally, which means I have access to a phone or a computer or whatever where I got this book. And a lot of the times it is also implicit that if you read the book, you understood some of it, which means you have some level of advanced cognitive function to understand and translate literal words into something of meaning in your mind. All of that is exformation. All of that is left out. You still do the subconscious processing of going through this chain, but that's your mind. You, or the I, never does or has any idea that you're doing any of this. I could keep going on about this book forever. I loved it. It's incredible in the ideas it presents and the theories it puts in front of you. and how Tor Norretranders is able to back all of it, is able to give you these concrete definitions and examples, and just introduce these new concepts out to you, in a very easy to understand manner. Now, all of this might seem very complicated, and that could mostly be my fault in, not having better words to make the same arguments that Tor Norretranders made. But it's an incredibly readable book. At no point does it feel like you're reading something about information theory. At no point does it feel like you're reading, an introductory textbook on thermodynamics. The first few pages of the book are pure thermodynamics. He's just explaining what it is to you, and it doesn't feel like a textbook. It still feels like it is part of a more broader, coherent idea that you will be presented with eventually. And so it's written at that level where you cover a lot of things, but you go just deep enough to understand the intentions and the ideas behind them without making it overly complicated and hard to understand and starting to look like a textbook. Incredible book, absolutely amazing. And, it's something I would recommend to everyone, because people have this conception, and now I would say this misconception, in a sense almost, that you are in control, that there is such a thing as a very substantive I, or a very substantive thing that is me. But in reality, it's just a very thin layer of consciousness laid on top of all the information processing going on in your brain. And that's like an incredible thing to read firsthand for yourself. You can make your own revelations / discoveries / inferences based on what you read. I'm not going to do that any further. I think this review is running pretty long. But absolutely incredible book. Something I would recommend to almost every single person to read. Here it is once again. Great book. And that's it for the review. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you hit the like button. If you're new and haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel to keep receiving more videos like this one. I've been Abeer Rao, and thanks for watching.